Splitting is a psychological tactic that forces people into extreme categories. Most people experience relationships as gradual. People reveal themselves slowly. You form complex opinions based on accumulated evidence. But if you've ever been on the receiving end of a toxic dynamic, you know that something different can happen. And it feels like it happens all at once. The person who loved you starts seeing you as a monster. The people who were neutral suddenly view you as the villain. And the person who did the damage, they're suddenly the victim. This isn't confusion. This isn't grief. This is a psychological mechanism being deployed, and understanding it changes everything. Splitting is the division of people, situations, or oneself into absolute categories of good or bad, with no middle ground, no complexity, and no tolerance for the fact that human beings contain multitudes. The word comes from psychoanalytic theory, from Melanie Klein's work in the early 20th century, but you don't need a clinical diagnosis to use this mechanism. In fact, manipulators use it deliberately. They reduce complex human beings into two categories, those who serve them and those who threaten them. And here is what makes it so insidious. You can be moved between these categories instantly, based entirely on whether you are useful or resistant in that moment. Let me paint the picture. A person enters your life and experiences you in full dimension. Your strengths, your flaws, your context, your nuance. For a while they accept this complexity, but then you set a boundary, or you question them, or you start to pull away, and something shifts. Suddenly, everything you ever did is reframed. Every kindness becomes manipulation. Every shared moment becomes evidence of your true nature. The person who once saw you clearly is now seeing only what serves them. This is splitting in action. And the most dangerous part isn't that they're doing it. It is that they're doing it so you can see them doing it. Human beings are wired to look for clarity in ambiguous situations. When we encounter a conflict between two people, we instinctively want to know who to root for. We want the narrative to be simple, good versus evil, hero versus villain. Splitting exploits this. When a manipulator consistently frames themselves as the victim and you as the perpetrator, the people around you face a cognitive pressure, adopt the binary, or sit in uncomfortable complexity. Most people choose clarity. They choose the story that makes sense. And the manipulator has designed that story specifically to make you the villain. In splitting, there are only ever two categories. Category 1, the idealized. These are people who reflect the manipulator positively, who validate their narrative, who serve their needs, and who never challenge them. Category 2, the devalued. These are former allies, former supporters, former lovers who have been reclassified. Everything about them is now filtered through a negative lens. Their accomplishments become tricks. Their kindness becomes manipulation. Their existence becomes a threat. Notice what happens. You cannot exist outside these categories. You cannot be neutral. You cannot be complex. Before splitting can work as a weapon, it needs a foundation. And that foundation is the idealization phase. In romantic relationships, this looks like love bombing. The overwhelming early affection, the instant soulmate connection, the performance of being perfectly matched. In professional contexts, it might look like a mentor suddenly championing you, including you, making you feel chosen. The idealization phase serves two purposes. First, it builds your investment. You believe you are in something real because the feelings were so intense. Second, it establishes a benchmark. Everyone watching remembers how much the manipulator loved you, which makes the subsequent destruction more confusing and more dramatic. This is where splitting becomes most visible and most damaging. When a manipulator begins to devalue a target, something characteristic happens. They don't just express dissatisfaction or withdraw. They reframe the entire history. Nothing you did was real. Everything you were was fake. The person who loved you so intensely was being deceived by you, or was foolish, or was manipulated. The devaluation phase isn't about processing real information about who you are. It is about destroying the previous category entirely and replacing it with its opposite. The manipulator doesn't just change their mind. They change the narrative retroactively. Here is what the manipulator knows about you. You remember the good times. You remember being loved. You remember the person who seemed to see you clearly. And now that same person is telling you none of it was real, and everyone around you is starting to agree. This creates a devastating psychological condition. You are holding on to evidence of something that apparently never existed. Your own memory becomes unreliable. Your own interpretation of events is suddenly suspect. You start to question whether you were the problem all along. And this is the goal. Destabilization isn't a side effect of splitting. It is the purpose of splitting. Think about what the manipulator needs. They need their behavior to be justified. They need the people around them to understand why they had to act the way they did. and they need to preserve their own image as good, as right, as justified. This is why you must become the villain. If you are the villain, then everything they did was necessary. Every cruelty was self-defense. Every lie was protection. Every betrayal was actually your fault for pushing them to it. The all-bad category isn't just about perception, it is about moral absolution. The manipulator needs you to be evil so they can be innocent. Now let's talk about what happens externally. The manipulator begins speaking about you to others, not in private but where it counts. They plant seeds of doubt. They mention concerns they've had. They share selective information designed to make you look controlling, unstable, or manipulative. Over time, this creates a foundation. When the final split happens, when you are finally devalued, people are already primed. They've heard the warnings, they've received the narrative. And when the manipulator finally declares you to be toxic, everyone nods. Because it fits what they were told, the split doesn't create the narrative from nothing, it confirms what was already planted. This is where splitting connects to something we've discussed before on this channel. The flying monkeys. The mechanism is simple. By splitting you into the all-bad category, the manipulator automatically elevates everyone else into the all-good category. The people who support them become allies. The people who validate their narrative become trusted, and these allies are recruited without ever being explicitly asked to take sides. The splitting does it for them. When you are categorized as the enemy, everyone who opposes you becomes a friend. And because they've been trained to see you in binary terms, they enforce the binary without realizing they're being used. Once the allies are recruited, splitting becomes a feedback loop. The flying monkeys don't just passively agree with the manipulator's narrative. They actively enforce it. They repeat it. They add their own evidence. And remember, they're seeing you through the same binary lens. Any complexity you show is reframed as evidence of your manipulation. Any calm response is proof you are cold. Any defense is proof you are attacking. The flying monkeys become the manipulator's army, and they're not even aware they're being deployed. They believe they're protecting someone good from someone bad. Splitting has made that belief feel like obvious truth. Splitting is devastating in family systems. A toxic parent or sibling will often create golden children and scapegoats. The golden child exists in the all-good category. Everything they do is wonderful. Every flaw is endearing. The scapegoat exists in the all-bad category. Nothing they do is right. Every accomplishment is diminished. And here is what makes it so hard to escape. The categorization isn't based on reality. It is based entirely on usefulness. The moment the golden child stops being useful, they become the scapegoat, and the scapegoat who manages to succeed. Their success is absorbed into the family narrative in a way that erases the category shift. You don't need a romantic relationship to experience splitting. Workplaces are perfect environments for this mechanism. A toxic manager or colleague will split the team into those who are with us and those who are against us. The with us group receives validation, credit, and protection. The against us group receives blame, exclusion, and manufactured consequences. The splitting serves a dual purpose. It motivates the favored group through intermittent reward, and it punishes the devalued group through systematic disadvantage. And the binary framing makes it impossible to address the dysfunction. If you complain about unfair treatment, you are not being a team player. If you document problems, you are building a case against the company. If you are on the receiving end of a split, you probably feel an intense urge to defend yourself, to present evidence, to show people who you really are, to demonstrate that the binary narrative is wrong. This is the trap. The more you try to defend yourself, the more you fit the binary. The manipulator has already prepared for this. Your defense becomes proof that you are defensive. Your evidence becomes selective or manipulated. Your calm becomes fake, and your upset becomes proof of your instability. There is no argument that works because the frame was designed to make every response confirm the frame. You are trapped in a logic system that has no exit. Let's get into the science. The human brain is not naturally equipped to process complexity quickly. Under stress, the amygdala, the threat detection center, takes over. The prefrontal cortex, which handles nuance, complexity, and long-term thinking, goes partially offline. This is why splitting feels so real to everyone involved. The all good and all bad categories feel true because they're processed emotionally, not analytically. The manipulator experiences their own narrative as genuine because they're not analyzing it, they're feeling it. And the flying monkeys experience the narrative as obvious because their own threat detection system is engaged. Complexity requires cognitive resources that stress makes unavailable. Binary thinking is neurologically easier, which is why it is so persuasive, even when it is obviously wrong. Here is something most people don't consider. The manipulator might actually believe their own split. It is not purely cynical. For some individuals, particularly those with narcissistic or antisocial traits. The capacity for nuance genuinely diminishes under certain conditions. They construct a reality where they are the hero of every story because that is what their psyche requires. The self-deception might be partial, or it might be complete. But here is the critical point. It doesn't matter. Whether the manipulator genuinely believes you are all bad or is strategically performing the belief, the effect on you is identical. The narrative is deployed. The flying monkeys are recruited. The reputation is destroyed. The mechanism works regardless of the manipulator's internal state. After a split has been executed, something strange happens in the social environment. You cannot be neutral about the manipulator anymore. The people around you have been trained to pick a side. If you don't explicitly support the manipulator, you are against them. If you don't validate their narrative, you are still defending the target. Silence becomes complicity in the eyes of the flying monkeys and the target. They have their own choice: accept the narrative or be defined by their resistance to it. Either way, the split has colonized the social space. There is no room for "I don't know enough to say" or "I see complexity here." The binary has taken over the entire ecosystem. Here is something that needs to be said. Some targets were never really idealized. For certain manipulators, the idealization phase is thinner, shorter, or purely strategic. They perform enough warmth to get investment, but internally, they've already categorized you. You were always the all-bad category waiting to be revealed. The relationship wasn't a betrayal of idealization. It was a delay in the inevitable devaluation. If you experienced this, you might have felt early warning signs. The idealization felt hollow. The connection felt performative. That is because it was. For some targets, the split was always coming, and the entire relationship was just the setup. There is a pattern worth noting. Splitting tends to intensify when targets set boundaries. The manipulator doesn't just devalue you when you are no longer useful. They devalue you precisely when you assert yourself. The boundary itself becomes evidence of your all-bad nature. Look at how selfish they are. Look at how they're putting themselves first. This is who they really are. The irony is stunning. The boundary that protects your psychological integrity becomes the catalyst for your destruction. But the manipulator needs this. They need the boundary to be evidence, because the alternative, that you had a legitimate right to assert yourself, would require admitting that the dynamic was unequal, and that can't be allowed. We've talked about the discard protocol on this channel before, but there is a direct connection between splitting and discard. The split is what makes discard possible. Without the binary framing, discarding someone requires acknowledging their complexity, their value, your own contribution to the failure. The split eliminates all of that. The target is simply all bad. The relationship failed because of them. And the discard is not cruelty. It is necessary self-protection. The manipulator can walk away feeling righteous because splitting has already done the moral work. The target was always the villain. The discard is just the final act of a story that was predetermined. After the discard, the split continues. The manipulator needs the post-discard narrative to be consistent with the split. This means continued devaluation. Every action the target takes is filtered through the all-bad lens. Any attempt to move on is evidence of their true nature. Any attempt to heal is performing recovery for attention. Any silence is knowing they got away with it. And if the target tries to tell their story, the flying monkeys are already primed. The narrative is already established. The target's attempt to speak becomes further proof of their manipulation. The split doesn't end at discard. It becomes the lens through which every future action is interpreted, forever. You might be watching this thinking, "I would never fall for that," and maybe you wouldn't. But splitting is designed to exploit universal cognitive vulnerabilities, not individual weakness. The halo effect, where one positive quality makes someone seem entirely good, makes idealization persuasive. The horn effect, where one negative quality makes someone seem entirely bad, makes devaluation feel obvious. Social proof, where people seeing others take a side makes picking a side feel safer, makes the flying monkey army compelling. Cognitive dissonance reduction, where people need consistency between what they're told and what they see, makes the binary feel like the simplest explanation. These are not character flaws. They're human features. Here is what splitting fundamentally does. It erases nuance. And nuance is the thing that makes relationships real, that makes accountability complex, that makes human beings difficult to control. A nuanced view of you would acknowledge your context, your history, your growth, your contradictions. A nuanced view would make you difficult to categorize, and therefore difficult to destroy. Splitting removes that protection. The manipulator needs you to be simple so that your destruction can be simple. The flying monkeys need you to be simple so they don't have to sit with uncomfortable questions. And the ecosystem needs the binary so that someone can be right and someone can be wrong. without anyone having to hold the full weight of human complexity. There is a cruel irony in splitting that I want to name explicitly. The target, the person who experienced the harm, becomes the villain in the narrative. The manipulator, the person who deployed the harm, becomes the hero of the story. The person who should be telling their own story is instead being defined by someone else's narrative. Their voice is discredited before they can speak. Their experiences are reframed before they can share them. Their healing is pathologized. This is why survivors of narcissistic abuse often describe feeling erased, not just during the relationship, but after it. The split has colonized their story. The binary has replaced their complexity. Let's get practical. How do you identify when splitting is happening around you? First, look for the binary. Is someone being described in absolute terms, all good or all bad, no middle ground, no complexity? Second, look for the inconsistency. Does this person's current narrative contradict your own observations of the person being described? Third, look for the source. Who benefits from the binary framing? Who is elevated by the devaluation? Fourth, look for your own reaction. Do you feel pressure to pick a side? Do you feel uncomfortable with the simplicity of the narrative? That discomfort might be your complexity. Processing systems recognizing that something is wrong. This is harder but essential. Ask yourself, do I categorize people based on how they serve me? Do I struggle to hold conflicting information about someone? Do I swing between idealizing and devaluing people? Sometimes in the same day, do I reframe entire histories based on current feelings? These aren't character flaws. They might be defense mechanisms you developed in response to unstable environments. But recognizing them gives you power over them. Splitting only works as a manipulation tool if it operates outside awareness. When you catch yourself doing it, you can choose something more complex, and that choice, the choice to hold nuance, is an act of resistance against every manipulator who wants you to see the world in binary terms. In contrast to splitting, healthy relationships involve something most people take for granted: the capacity to hold complexity. Your partner, your friend, your colleague is a full human being. They have strengths and flaws. They've done things you agree with and things you don't. They can hurt you and apologize. You can disagree with them and still respect them. There is no binary. There is no pressure to pick a side. There is room for ambiguity, for growth, for revision. The relationship isn't simple because the people in it aren't simple, and that is not a problem. That is the whole point. Human beings are not categories. Relationships are not wars, and the people who try to make them that way are telling you something important about themselves. If you've been split, I want to acknowledge something. The long game is exhausting. The manipulator has the narrative. The flying monkeys enforce it, and you are left trying to exist in a world that has been pre-framed against you. The resistance isn't dramatic. It isn't a moment of confrontation where you prove everyone wrong. It is quiet. It is consistent. It is showing up as yourself over and over, without the performance that splitting requires. It is holding your own complexity when the world wants to reduce you. It is refusing to play the binary game while being constantly pressured to pick a side. This is hard, but it is also the only path to something real, because everything built on splitting is counterfeit, and counterfeit can't last. Here is what I want you to take away from this. Splitting is a mechanism that exploits the human desire for simplicity. It offers clarity in a complex world. It offers certainty in an ambiguous world. It offers a story where you can be right and someone else can be wrong. But it is a lie. It is a lie told by people who can't tolerate complexity. And it is a lie believed by people who can't tolerate ambiguity. And it is a lie that damages the targets who don't fit the categories. The truth is that human beings are not simple. The truth is that relationships are not wars. The truth is that the manipulators who split are doing so because they cannot hold the full weight of reality. And the people who believe them are choosing comfort over truth. You don't have to make that choice. You can hold the complexity. You can see the nuance. You can refuse the binary. And that refusal, that insistence on the full picture, is its own form of resistance. If this video resonated with you, I'd encourage you to explore the rest of the channel. We've covered many of the tactics that connect to splitting: the flying monkeys, the discard protocol, the erasure protocol, Darvo, and more. Each one is a piece of the same puzzle. Understanding manipulation isn't just about protecting yourself. It is about becoming harder to deceive and more capable of seeing people clearly. If you found value here, consider subscribing. And if there is a specific tactic you want us to cover next, drop it in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.